Software to Die For, the Promis software scandal and how the U.S. Justice Department became software pirates in the name of national security, with Ted St. Rein. Or Teed, if you prefer. Brought to you by ToorCamp and ToorCon.org. Check them out. www.mediaarchives.com proudly presents this material. Thank you for watching. Also check out www.promisscandal.com. You know, the rule of suicide, but you know, it's funny, I had another good friend of mine, another father figure of mine, ended up dying the same way. Not just one, but then there's another gunshot to the head. So, of course, he didn't make the claim that he'd never kill himself. And then anybody know who this is? Mae Brussell. She's basically responsible for starting all this. All the conspiracies, all the 1960s, you know. Anybody heard of the gemstone file? Google that one, the gemstone file. She's not involved with it, of course, but it was, it's like one of these underground white papers that spread from, underground activist to underground activist. This is the way it was. It's basically a timeline of the Kennedy assassination, the gemstone file. But anyway, so Mae Brussell, rest in peace for her too. She's a great gal. She had a radio show and all sorts of stuff out of the Bay Area. Amazing. And then once again, my friend Ken Thomas, he's pretty much the only surviving, journalist left reporting the story. And once again, with Jim Keith, he wrote this book called The Octopus, available on Amazon for like a couple bucks, used. I highly recommend reading it. A lot of the research I did from here. Oh yeah, and there. Who was that? Well, that's Danny Casolaro, supposedly. That's an artist's rendition of Danny in the bathroom. And so, and I'd go closer on that, but then I screw up my presentation. And so, so there's been a number of other researchers, had some problems. Michael Rupert, has been reporting on Promis for years and years. FromTheWilderness.com is the website, still active. He actually had moved to Ashland, and then somebody broke into his offices and smashed up all his computers and everything. And not only that, they took his computers apart and smashed up the IC chips that were in the hard drives and everything in them. And then he moved off to Brazil or up to Venezuela, where gas is 23 cents a gallon. And his current whereabouts are somewhere else. Oh, and damn, how did that get in there? So anyway, there's all sorts of, anybody know who Jack Parsons is? Oh, we got a Jack Parsons fan, yay! But Jack Parsons is basically the guy responsible for the helium nitrogen fueled engine that we use on the space shuttle and we use in all the Atlas rockets. In fact, the Titan missile that came out of here was probably, based on some design that he developed at JPL. In fact, they called JPL, and it wasn't Jet Propulsion Labs, it was Jack Parsons' personal lab, basically, because he's the one that basically developed it. And so, so it's interesting, though, that Jack Parsons was all into this metaphysical stuff. And of course, it all makes strange bedfellows there with John Kerry and everything, and you wonder what the connections there are. And so, once again, Barron's Financial Weekly, this our magazine here, the Insight magazine on the news, ran like 4 or 5, or I think it was a 4-part article. Here are the covers here, all about the Promis scandal. And this is all available online, all nice, really color photographs. So go check that out. They're out of business now, but you can still read all about Promis software. This one's not linked off my site, but just search for Insight magazine. And so nothing is secret, especially even back then, nothing was really secret. This day we know it, he's, the octopus. The octopus wants to be a little more respectable now, so they've dressed it up a little bit and, put a suit and a tie and some software and some, executive shoes on it. But basically it's just all about the same thing. Okay, so that's the basic presentation. Now I'm going to talk more about Ranos Sudo. He's a very, very interesting guy. And of course, here's his sheriff's department thing. What happened was he was Inslaw was suing the government, trying to get their millions of dollars they were owed, and Ranos Sudo, being the programmer, filed a deposition in the case. And within a week, he had been arrested for manufacturing drugs out in fact, it was right around here in Spokane, just in eastern Washington, right here. And they had raided his place. Somebody got some information. They raided his place. There's still concern whether he's actually manufacturing drugs. He was actually doing mining on the property, and some of these same chemicals could have been used for mining. But knowing the kind of person he is, who knows what the whole story is. But needless to say, within a week of him testifying and giving a deposition in the inslaw and the Promis software thing, he basically was facing 30 years in prison. And he's there today. In fact, I think he's back in Pennsylvania. If anyone wants to write to him, I encourage it. And so, but in his younger years, he was a child prodigy. He had made, in fact, anybody heard of Hercules, California? I used to live there for like a couple months, surprisingly, before I knew all about the connections. But there was this thing called the Hercules Armament Corporation, I think it was, and it's basically just east of San Francisco, in a little town called Hercules, right near Martinez, which is the oil manufacturer. And so they made these fuel air explosives that we were talking about. And so this is what Ranos Sudo is known at 12 years old, a Tacoma boy here in Washington. He grew up around here. Basically developed a way to use sound to basically weld hot spots in like metals and stuff. And here's an article on the new basically freezing hot spots in metal and stuff. And he's a child prodigy, developed all this electrostatic cooling, simplifies the welding of wing pins. At 12, 13 years old, this kid's designing this stuff. And here he is, there he is in the center with his dad, Marshall Ranos Sudo. Some of these pictures are kind of hard to find. And so he was all in the middle of this because he was the one that supposedly developed and changed the software. Once again, the Last Circle, I think it's lastcircle.org it could be. And so he basically went to bat for Promis and the inslaw because he had the inside information about all the stuff that was going on. And of course, a lot of this stuff was sealed up. You'll never see it for like 50 years. You think the Kennedy assassination was bad? Like this is like above that. Sorry to say. And so within a week, let's see if we got the articles here. This is 4/4/1991. And this is bad. So within March 31st, 1991, within days of Casellero being murdered, and within a week of Ranos Sudo giving his testimony in front of the deposition, he's jailed for 30 years. And there he sits in prison. And people go there to interview him, and he tells a story. There's only so much he can say. Right after he was thrown in prison, he was providing all sorts of information. He was calling people collect and providing all sorts of information. In fact, I've got the whole thing here that we just probably don't have time for because we're going to run out of tape. We've got 90 minutes on the one tape. And so, but what's very interesting is that back, he was the guy that met with Osama bin Laden, or Tim Osman. There's a Michael Osman presented here. I found that very interesting that, Tim Osman, was Osama's name that the CIA had given him. And so once again, there's all these basically different stories. And here's an example. They were when he met with Osama bin Laden, they were there to discuss how to get Osama some of these man pads, these air surface-to-air missiles that they need to shoot out these Russian fighters, that we were fighting against here on this missile base. But they couldn't do it because they're all the import controls. And so Ranos Sudo knew some people where they could get the raw materials. I forget where it was, but because Ranos Sudo is involved with this Hercules Armament Corporation, they could get the raw materials shipped in from China or somewhere, and they could manufacture them at a place that they called the Pakistan Ordnance Works. And so then they could get all the raw, and so then they could make their own Stinger missiles on site. And so it was Ranos Sudo who set this all up. I mean, Ranos Sudo was doing this as a service to the country, just like the people would go down every day and every week and be in these silos all day long and ready to press the button. This is what Ranos Sudo, he was fighting the enemy supposedly, this big puppet enemy that they had created, called the Soviet Union, And so Ranos Sudo is all over the place. Here he is, and he was a narcotic. He was in the narcotics field back when he was working, secret clearances and stuff. He's working in narcotics and stuff. Of course, you got to be working in narcotics to be able to, know enough about narcotics to be able to smuggle drugs for the CIA and the DEA. I will add. And so, and Ranos Sudo is very helpful. He solved this after he was in prison. He helped solve the murder. He helped solve murders in Cabazon. These people that had been murdered in Cabazon. He started sending information to the chief of police, the new chief of police there, to help solve some of these murders that occurred because he had inside information and still does. See, it's amazing he's still alive. Of the one person they should have killed, it would have been Ranos Sudo. But somehow they did him such a big favor that they said, here, you can just live in prison here, eat the nice food here in the federal penitentiary, and we'll see you in 30 years. Maybe you'll get out. Maybe no. And so Ranos Sudo is all over the place. Narcotics, San Francisco Bureau, 1982. And of course, they didn't find any drug-like contamination at the site when they did the soil test. Supposedly they cleaned it all up and stuff. But anyway, so there's controversy on whether, he was actually manufacturing drugs at the site at all, and whether they just wanted to get him out of the picture and shut him up, which effectively they'd done. And so another interesting thing about Ranos Sudo, he wrote this 4-page letter. I got it here. You should read it online. Notice the date, February 5th, 2001. And it just goes on. And he sent this letter to his attorney. And it talks all about his involvement with Promis and all about his involvement with Obama, Osama bin Laden, and Barack Obama. No, and but I should make the point that all these same institutions and these same people that were involved with all of this stuff were the same people who brought it to the Bush administration, which is basically the same thing as the Obama administration. All these same players and all these key people, especially now they brought all these Clinton people back, from the closet. They brought all these old advisors in, and it's basically all the same people. Then because it wasn't just the Republicans that were after this software, the Democrats had uses for it too. It goes way above all that. Of course, me, I didn't know. But I filmed the Libertarian National Convention like a year ago, and I didn't realize it, but I'll be damned if I am not a libertarian. I don't know how that happened, but. So anyway, so he sends this big letter, and in it, he predicts 9/11. He says there's going to be a big terrorist event happening in the United States. Terrorists who plan on entering the United States in the very near future for purposes of terrorist activities. He wishes to speak to you about these blah, blah, blah. And so this was sent to Colin Powell. It was sent to all the people in government that this guy in prison had information about a future terrorist attack preceding 9/11. This one's dated February 19, 2001. And here's the certified return receipts from the attorney, mailing him all these places. And of course, the 9/11 hijackers, they're just laughing it up, And not only were we I don't know how much you guys know about 9/11, not only were we tracking, all these people, but, there were other intelligence agencies around the world tracking them as well, and leaving paths for them to be open, letting them, escape another path. So once again, it's a very interesting tangled web we weave, and once again, it's all about, that Big Brother is watching us, and, there's really no getting around it. Anybody know who this guy is? George Wackenhut?
Security guy, isn't he?
Security guy, excellent. Wackenhut Security. We've got a bright crowd here today on July 5th, 2009 at 3:33 in the morning at the nuclear missile base. And so what's interesting is that Wackenhut handles security for all the nuclear installations. In fact, if this base was still an organization, Wackenhut, it's basically the private FBI. When you retire from the FBI or the CIA, you go to work for Wackenhut. They find something for you to do so you can live out your wee years in the twilight of nuclear security. And of course, they're best known for handle security at the infamous Area 51. The only UFO I've ever seen in my life has been flying over Area 51. They call it Old Faithful. It used to be out in the 90s, late 80s, 90s. If you went out there, you could, go out there at 4:55 in the morning, Thursday morning, and you sit in a certain spot, and Old Faithful would come up over the horizon, and then it might blink out, and a millisecond later, it would be 5,000 feet in the air. Just like blink, blink, blink. And there's no physical way that could happen, like with today's technology. It's using this reverse engineered, supposedly alien technology, or if you follow like anti-gravitics, another term to Google, anti-gravitic craft or anti-gravitics, T. Townsend Brown, the Paul Byfield effect, for an example. And so all these technologies have been developed. I don't really necessarily believe that UFOs are coming from extraterrestrial civilizations. I mean, they exist out there, I'm sure, and they've probably been here many times, and looking for intelligent life, and of course didn't find any. But a lot of the technology we have, these UFOs, they can all be man-made. In fact, there was a big air flap from the big UFO air flap of 1897 where a series of UFOs were seen flying over a Texas town in Texas, and supposedly they were developed right here in the USA.